Michael Reynolds's garage carried the familiar scent of oil and metal, a fragrance that had seeped into his hands and his clothes over 20 years. At 45, those marks were as much a part of him as the lines that had gathered around his blue eyes, silent witnesses to a life defined by uncertainty. "Mr. Johnson, your transmission will be ready tomorrow," Michael said, wiping his hands on a rag that had long since forgotten it was once white. The customer nodded, paid the deposit, and left the shop. Michael glanced at the wall clock, 7:15 p.m. It had been a long, productive day, but just like every evening for the past 12 years, he felt a familiar hollowness bloom in his chest at the thought of going home. Chicago, in November of 2011, was especially cold. Snow was beginning to collect on the sidewalks as Michael locked up the garage. 12 years ago, on a similar night, though in April, his life had changed forever. April 1st, 1999. "Lucas, finish your homework before dinner," Rachel said, chopping vegetables in the kitchen. Her brown hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Though she was only 31, her face held a disquiet that Michael had noticed more and more in recent weeks. "Are you okay?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Rachel flinched slightly, then smiled, but the gesture didn't reach her eyes. "Just tired," she replied. "It's been busy at the library lately." Michael nodded, though he wasn't convinced. Rachel had been distant. He would sometimes find her staring out the window with a lost expression, or repeatedly checking the door locks before they went to bed. 8-year-old Lucas ran into the kitchen. "Mom, I finished my math problems. Can I watch TV now?" Rachel bent down and kissed her son's forehead. 20 minutes. No more. Dinner will be ready soon." That night, they ate like any other family. Michael talked about a classic car he was restoring. Lucas chattered about a school project, and Rachel listened, her smile seeming more fragile by the minute. Nothing suggested it would be the last time they would be together as a family. The next morning, Michael woke up alone in bed. It wasn't unusual. Rachel sometimes got up early to make breakfast, but when he went down to the kitchen, he found Lucas sitting at the table by himself. "Where's Mom?" the boy asked. A chill snaked down Michael's spine. He checked the whole house, the bathroom, the basement, the yard. Rachel's car was gone from the driveway. Her cell phone was on the dining room table next to her wallet. Her clothes were still in the closet except for what she had been wearing the day before. By sunset, the police had taken a report. "Voluntary disappearance," one of the officers suggested. "Most adults who go missing do so by choice," he explained. But Michael knew Rachel. She would never abandon Lucas. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Michael hired a private detective who found nothing. City security cameras never caught Rachel's car leaving Chicago. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. Present day, 2011, Michael's apartment was a 15-minute drive from the garage. A year after Rachel disappeared, he had sold the family house. The memories were too painful. Lucas, now 20, was studying engineering at the University of Illinois. Life had moved on, but the unanswered questions still hung over them both. That night, as Michael was fixing a simple dinner for one, his phone rang. "Dad?" Lucas's voice was tense. "I just got a weird email. Someone says they saw Mom." Michael felt the air get punched from his lungs. "What? Who?" "An old neighbor of ours, Mrs. Patel. She says she was visiting Chicago and thinks she saw Mom on Lower Wacker Drive, living on the street." Michael sat down slowly. Over the years, they had received dozens of sightings that led nowhere. Well-meaning people who thought they saw Rachel in malls, in other states, even in other countries. Every one was a false alarm that only served to reopen the wound. "Lucas, we can't," I know, Dad, but she attached a blurry photo she took with her phone. It's not great, but... Lucas's voice broke. It looks so much like her. Michael closed his eyes. The pain had never really left. He had just learned to live alongside it. Send me the picture, he said finally. Seconds later, his phone buzzed. With trembling hands, he opened the message. The image was indeed blurry. A woman with her back mostly to the camera, her hair matted, her clothes worn, turning slightly. And though only a sliver of her profile was visible, Michael felt the world stop. Those eyes. He knew those eyes better than his own. He grabbed his car keys and rushed out. Lower Wacker Drive was notorious for its tunnels beneath the city, where many of the homeless sought shelter from Chicago's relentless winter. As he drove, Michael fought against the hope rising in his throat. 12 years of fruitless searching had taught him not to get his hopes up. The tunnel was dimly lit, groups of people huddled around small fires crackling in metal drums. Michael walked slowly, scanning every face, every silhouette. For an hour he searched without success. He was about to give up when he saw her. She was sitting next to a bearded man, sharing what looked like a can of food. Her hair, once silky and cared for, was a tangled mess on her now thin shoulders. Her face showed the ravages of a hard life. But it was her. It was Rachel, his wife. Michael froze. 12 years of unanswered questions, 12 years of imagining 1,000 scenarios, and now she was just a few feet away. He took a step forward, then another. Rachel. His voice was barely a whisper. The woman looked up. Her eyes, the eyes he had loved for so long, stared back at him with no recognition at all. "Excuse me, sir," she answered, her voice rough. "My name is Anna." Time seemed to freeze. Michael felt the ground beneath him dissolve as he stared at the face of the woman who had once been the center of his universe. Despite the damage etched into her features, every line was painfully familiar. "Anna," Michael repeated, his voice cracking. "No, you're Rachel. Rachel Reynolds." The woman's brow furrowed in confusion. The bearded man beside her tensed, sitting up straighter in a protective stance. "You got a problem, pal?" he asked, his voice a low gravel. Michael barely registered him. His eyes remained locked on Rachel, searching for any flicker of recognition. "Rachel, it's me. Michael, your husband," he insisted, taking another step forward. The woman who called herself Anna instinctively drew back, her hand tightening on the bearded man's arm. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said, but there was something in her voice, a slight hesitation that ignited a spark of hope in Michael. "We have a son, Lucas. You disappeared on April 2nd, 1999. You worked at the Oak Park Public Library." The words tumbled out of Michael's mouth. "Our first date was at Navy Pier. I gave you a necklace with a star charm for our 5th anniversary." With each detail, Anna's face grew more troubled. Her eyes, once vacant, now held an inner storm. "Let's go, Ray," she said to the bearded man, getting up quickly. "Wait, please." Michael pulled out his phone, his fingers fumbling. "Look, I have pictures." He showed her the screen, an image of Rachel smiling next to a small Lucas on his 8th birthday. Just days before she vanished, the woman stared at the photo, and for a fleeting moment, Michael saw something shift in her eyes. "I don't know who those people are," she said, but her voice trembled. "Please just leave us alone." "Anna's been with me for almost 10 years, the man named Ray cut in. "I don't know who you think she is, but you're wrong." Michael felt like he was losing the only chance he'd had in 12 years. "Just answer one thing," he pleaded. "On your left wrist, do you have a small crescent-shaped scar? You got it when you were 16 breaking a window to rescue your neighbor's cat." The woman instinctively covered her left wrist with her right hand. Her face went pale. "Ray, let's go." she whispered urgently. They started to walk away quickly. Michael followed at a distance. He couldn't lose her again. Not now. Please, he called out. Lucas deserves to know what happened to you. I deserve to know. The pair quickened their pace, disappearing into the darker parts of the tunnel. Desperation washed over Michael. He pulled out his phone and dialed Lucas, his hands shaking. I found her, he said the moment his son answered. It's her, Lucas, but she doesn't recognize me. Or she's pretending not to. She calls herself Anna. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Dad? Lucas's voice was cautious, as if afraid to feed a false hope. Are you sure? Completely. She has the scar on her wrist. It's your mother. Where are you? I'll get the first train to Chicago. Lower Wacker Drive. I'm following her. I can't lose her. Dad, be careful. If it really is Mom and she doesn't want to be found. Michael knew what his son meant. What if Rachel had chosen to disappear? What if she had willingly abandoned them? It was a possibility he had considered for years, but always rejected. The Rachel he knew would never do that. He continued to follow the couple through the tunnels, keeping a safe distance. He saw them stop with a group of homeless people sheltering under a warm air vent. Ray seemed to be arguing with Anna, occasionally pointing back in Michael's direction. Finally, to Michael's surprise, the woman broke away from the group and started walking toward him. Her face was a mixture of fear and determination. Why are you following me? She asked when she was close enough. Because you're my wife, Michael answered simply. Because for 12 years I've wondered what happened to you. If you were alive or dead. Because our son grew up without his mother. The woman closed her eyes briefly, as if the words caused her physical pain. I'm not who you think I am, she insisted, but with less conviction than before. Then how do you explain knowing exactly where that scar is? Michael asked softly. Rachel, whatever happened, we can figure it out. Lucas and I, we just want to understand. For a moment it looked like something inside her might break. Her eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. I can't do this, she murmured. Not now. Give me 1 hour, Michael begged. Just 1 hour to talk. After that, if you want me to walk out of your life forever, I will, I promise. The woman glanced back to where Ray was watching her with concern. Tomorrow? She proposed finally. There's a coffee shop on the corner of Lake and Michigan, 10 in the morning. Michael nodded, afraid that if he pushed for more, she would vanish again. I'll be there, he promised. He watched her walk away, rejoin Ray, and disappear into the tunnel's shadows. Only then did Michael allow himself to lean against a wall and let the emotions overwhelm him. The tears he had held back for 12 years began to flow. The coffee shop was small and warm. Michael had arrived 45 minutes early, terrified she wouldn't show. Lucas had taken the first train from Champaign that morning and was now sitting across from him, drumming his fingers nervously on the table. What if she doesn't come? Lucas asked for the third time. She'll come, Michael replied, though doubt was eating at him. At 10:05, the door opened. Anna walked in alone, wearing clean but worn clothes. She had pulled her hair back and washed her face. The resemblance to the Rachel they knew was now undeniable, though years on the street had left their mark on her prematurely aged features. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on Michael. Then her gaze shifted to Lucas and something in her expression changed. A flicker of recognition, perhaps even pain. She walked slowly toward them. Lucas stood up, his face pale. Mom? He whispered. The woman stopped, her eyes fixed on the young man her son had become. For an instant she looked as if she might turn and run, but then, unexpectedly, she reached out a trembling hand and touched Lucas's cheek. You've gotten so big, she murmured, and for the first time there was no denial in her voice. A choked sob escaped Lucas, and without warning, he pulled her into a hug. The woman was tense at first, but then slowly her arms wrapped around her son. Michael watched them, his heart hammering in his chest. After a moment, Rachel, because it was clear now that it was her, gently pulled away from Lucas and sat down across from them. "I don't know where to begin," she said finally, her hands clutching the coffee cup Michael had ordered for her. "Why did you leave?" Lucas asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Why did you abandon us?" Rachel flinched at the word abandon. "It wasn't like that," she answered quietly. "Not the way you think." Michael held his breath. For 12 years he had imagined this moment, the explanations Rachel might offer. None of his theories had prepared him for what he was about to hear. "I started having memories," Rachel began, her gaze fixed on her coffee. "Memories I'd blocked for years about my childhood." Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the ceramic. "I thought I was going insane. I was seeing shadows, hearing voices. I was convinced someone was following me, that someone was coming to hurt me, to hurt you." Michael remembered her behavior in the weeks before she left. The constant checking of the locks, the anxious glances out the window. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. Rachel looked up, her eyes filled with an infinite sadness. "Because I was afraid you'd be right," she answered, "afraid that I really was losing my mind." The quiet of the coffee shop seemed to amplify her every word. Michael and Lucas watched her, holding their breath, as she searched for the words to explain the inexplicable. "That night, the night I left," Rachel continued, her voice barely a whisper, "I had a nightmare. It was so vivid that when I woke up, I was convinced it was real. I saw a man in our room watching you. I thought he was coming for me, but that he would hurt you to get to me." Rachel took a sip of coffee, her hands still trembling. "I scrambled out of bed in a panic. I just ran from the house, not thinking, just needing to lead him away from you. I drove with no destination until the sun came up. By then, I was so confused. The voices in my head were so loud." "What voices?" Michael asked gently. "Voices from the past," Rachel answered. "My father." She paused, visibly struggling with the words. "I don't remember much of my childhood. I always told you it was because my mother died young and my father was distant. But the truth is, I blocked so much of it out." Lucas, who had been silent, finally spoke. "What happened after you left?" Rachel's gaze drifted to the window, as if watching a film of her own life. "I drove until I ran out of gas. I was somewhere in Wisconsin. I left the car at a gas station and just started walking. By that point, I was convinced I had to disappear to protect you, that if I ever came back, the danger would come back with me." "But why didn't you call?" Lucas's voice was heavy with 12 years of pain. "Why did you let us think you could be dead?" A single tear traced a path down Rachel's cheek. "For the first few weeks, my mind was fractured. I wandered from place to place. I slept where I could, ate what I could find. I think I had what doctors call a psychotic episode, triggered by stress and the repressed memories that were starting to surface." Michael remembered the searches, the posters, the sleepless nights. "We looked everywhere for you," he said. "I hired detectives, contacted the police in every neighboring state." "I know," Rachel replied. "I saw one of the posters about 6 months later. By then, I didn't know who I was anymore. My mind had built a new identity as a defense mechanism. I became Anna Wilson, a woman with no past." Lucas leaned forward. "You didn't remember anything about us? Nothing at all?" Rachel closed her eyes for a moment. "Not consciously, but I would dream of a little boy. I'd sometimes wake up crying with this feeling that I'd lost something precious, but I never knew what. Michael looked at his ex-wife, trying to reconcile the organized, loving librarian he had known with this fragile woman sitting before him. "How did you survive all those years?" he asked. "It was hard at first," Rachel admitted. "I slept in shelters when I could, on the streets when I couldn't. I cleaned houses, washed dishes, any job that didn't require an ID. Eventually, I made my way to Chicago. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if something in my subconscious was pulling me back." "And Ray?" Michael asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Rachel's face softened slightly. "Ray found me almost 10 years ago, during a particularly brutal winter. I was sick, with pneumonia. He took me to the hospital and stayed with me. He's a good man, Michael. He's had a hard life, but he has a generous heart." "Does he know who you really are?" Lucas asked. Rachel shook her head. "To him, I've always been Anna, a woman with no family, no past." Michael processed every word, trying to grasp the magnitude of what she had endured. "When did you start to remember?" "I've always had fragments," Rachel explained. "Stray images I couldn't connect. But it was seeing you yesterday. When you mentioned the scar," her voice broke. "It was like a floodgate opened. Not everything is back, but enough. Enough to know that you are my family." Lucas, who had maintained a surprising composure, finally let his tears flow freely. "I missed you so much, Mom," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone. There was always this empty space." Rachel reached her hand across the table and took her son's. "I am so sorry, Lucas," she whispered. "If I could go back." Michael watched the interaction between mother and son, a storm of conflicting emotions swirling inside him. Relief that she was found, grief for the lost time, confusion about how to move forward. "What happens now?" he finally asked. Rachel slowly withdrew her hand. "I don't know," she admitted. "This is all overwhelming. Part of me wants to reclaim my life, to get to know the man my son has become. But another part is afraid." Michael finished for her. Rachel nodded. "I still don't remember everything. The doctors say dissociative amnesia is a protective mechanism. My mind blocked memories that were too painful to face." "We can get help," Michael suggested. "There are specialists, therapies." "It's not that simple," Rachel interrupted. "There's Ray. He's been my one constant for a decade. I can't just disappear from his life like—" She stopped, aware of the irony in her words. "Like you did from ours?" Lucas completed, a trace of bitterness in his voice. Rachel looked down. "I need time," she said finally. "I need to talk to Ray, to explain, though I don't even know where to begin." Michael nodded slowly. After 12 years of uncertainty, he could wait a little longer. "Can I ask something?" Lucas said. "What were the memories that started coming back? What was so terrible it made you run?" Rachel visibly paled. Her hands began to tremble more intensely. "My father," she answered in a low voice. "The memories were about my father." Michael and Lucas both knew the official version. Rachel's father had been a distant man who raised her alone after her mother died of cancer when she was 5. A strict but fair man who had passed away shortly before Rachel met Michael. "What about your father?" Michael pressed gently. Rachel took a deep breath. "My father wasn't who I thought he was," she began. "The memories that have returned are fragmented, but they're enough to understand. There was abuse, physical and—" She trailed off, unable to continue. A chill ran down Michael's spine. During their marriage, Rachel had never wanted to talk much about her childhood, and he had respected her silence, attributing it to the pain of growing up without a mother. Why did those memories start coming back then, specifically? Lucas asked. Rachel stared out the window, her eyes focused on something far away. Lucas was about to turn 9, she answered in a monotone. The same age I was when the abuse escalated. A heavy silence fell over the table. I didn't understand it then, Rachel continued, but now I believe seeing Lucas reach that age triggered something deep in my mind. I started having flashbacks, nightmares. And then that night, the nightmare felt so real. I saw my father in our bedroom watching you. But your father was already gone, Michael pointed out softly. I know, Rachel replied. Rationally, I knew that even then, but in that moment the terror was real. The threat was real. Lucas ran a hand over his face, trying to process everything he was hearing. Did you ever get professional help in all these 12 years? Occasionally, Rachel admitted. Shelters sometimes have volunteer psychologists. One of them suggested I might be suffering from PTSD and dissociative amnesia, but with no health insurance, no resources, consistent treatment was never an option. Michael made a decision in that moment. It is now, he said firmly. If you're willing, we can find specialists, the best. You can have your life back, Rachel. For the first time since the conversation began, a small smile touched Rachel's lips. My life, she repeated as if tasting the words. I sometimes wonder if I even know who Rachel Reynolds is anymore. I've been Anna for so long. We can find out together, Lucas offered. I don't expect you to come back and be the same mom I remember. It's been 12 years, we've all changed. Rachel studied her son's face, marveling at the thoughtful man he had become. You're so grown up, she murmured. I missed so much. There's still time, Lucas replied. Rachel nodded slowly, but Michael saw the uncertainty in her eyes. What about Ray? He asked, guessing the source of her hesitation. I need to talk to him, Rachel said. I owe him that much. He's been my rock for years. Do you love him? The question escaped Michael's lips before he could stop it. Rachel met his gaze directly for the first time. I care for him deeply, she answered with raw honesty. He saved my life, literally. But what we have is different. It's a love born of survival, of mutual care in impossible circumstances. Michael nodded, appreciating her sincerity even as the words stung. Will we see you again? Lucas asked, anxiety clear in his voice. Rachel took a deep breath. Yes, she said with resolve. I can't promise what anything will look like, but I can promise I won't disappear again. I need time to talk to Ray to process all of this. But I'll be back. When? Lucas pressed. The day after tomorrow. Right here, Rachel replied. Same time. She rose slowly, and Michael noticed she looked physically exhausted, as if the conversation had drained her last reserves of energy. There's so much more I want to ask, Lucas murmured. So much I want to say. I know, Rachel said, gently touching her son's cheek. And we'll have time for all of it. I promise. Michael and Lucas watched as Rachel walked out of the coffee shop. Through the window they saw her pause on the sidewalk, closing her eyes for a moment as if gathering her strength, and then walk away. Do you think she'll come back? Lucas asked, the doubt plain in his voice. Michael followed Rachel's retreating figure until she disappeared into the crowd. Yes, he answered with a certainty he didn't know he felt. This time, she'll be back. The day of their reunion arrived with agonizing slowness. Michael had barely slept, tormented by unanswered questions and possibilities he didn't dare fully contemplate. Lucas had stayed over at his apartment, neither of them wanting to be alone with their thoughts. It's 9:30, Lucas announced, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. We should go. Michael nodded, a knot tightening in his stomach. A part of him feared Rachel had changed her mind, that the weight of confronting her past was too much to bear. They arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early. To their surprise, Rachel was already there, sitting at the same table they'd occupied 2 days before. She was not alone. Beside her sat Ray, his expression tense but resolute. Michael and Lucas exchanged a look of surprise before they approached. Rachel looked up and offered them a nervous smile. "Michael, Lucas," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is Raymond Walsh. Ray, this is my family." Ray stood and extended a hand. He was taller than Michael had perceived in the tunnel, his shoulders broad under a clean but worn shirt. Without the matted beard, Michael could see he was likely a few years older than him, with deep lines etched around surprisingly kind eyes. "It's good to formally meet you," Ray said, his voice raspy. "Rachel's been telling me, well, everything she can remember." Michael shook his hand, noting the calluses and the strength in his grip. "Thank you," he said with genuine sincerity, "for taking care of her." Ray gave a short nod and they all took their seats. An awkward silence settled over the table until Rachel finally spoke. "I've explained to Ray what we talked about," she said, "about my past, about what I think happened." "It wasn't easy to take in," Ray admitted. "After 10 years of knowing her as Anna," Rachel took his hand in a comforting gesture. "Ray has been extraordinarily understanding," she continued, "and he's encouraged me to find the answers, to reclaim my whole identity." Michael studied Ray with a new appreciation. It would take a remarkable man to support Rachel on this path, knowing he might lose her in the process. "Have you remembered anything else?" Lucas asked softly. Rachel nodded, her expression growing somber. "I've been talking with Ray, trying to piece the fragments together, and I think I understand more now about the night I left." She took a deep breath before continuing. "My father was a man with two faces. To the outside world, he was a respectable university professor, a widower devoted to his daughter. In private," her voice cracked slightly, "in private, he was a monster. The abuse began not long after my mother died, and it continued until I left for college." Michael thought of how Rachel had always avoided talking about her father, how she had never once wanted to visit his grave. "When we met," Rachel continued, looking at Michael, "I was in therapy, though I never told you. I was working to overcome my past, to build a normal life. And for a while it worked. I loved you. I loved Lucas. I loved our life." "But then something changed," Michael prompted. Rachel nodded. "As Lucas got closer to 9, I started having more intense flashbacks. My therapist had warned me this might happen, that milestones in a child's life can trigger repressed memories. But I wasn't prepared for the intensity of it." "Why didn't you talk to me about it?" Michael asked, not with reproach, but with genuine curiosity. "Shame," Rachel answered simply, "and fear. Fear that if you saw how truly damaged I was, you would stop loving me." Lucas, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "The night you disappeared, what happened exactly?" Rachel closed her eyes as if reliving it. "I had a nightmare. In it, my father came into our bedroom and he was taking Lucas. I was trying to stop him, but I couldn't move. When I woke up, I was utterly convinced it was real, that my father had somehow come back to hurt us." Michael remembered how Rachel would sometimes wake up screaming in the months before she vanished. "I ran from the house in a blind panic," she went on. "I drove with no direction, convinced that getting away from you was the only way to keep you safe. By the time the sun rose, I couldn't tell the difference between reality and nightmare. Something in my mind just broke. Ray, who had been listening in since, gave Rachel's hand a gentle squeeze. "You don't have to go on if it's too hard," he said. Rachel offered him a faint smile. "I need to," she replied. "They deserve to know." She turned back to Michael and Lucas. "The days that followed are a blur. I drove until the car ran out of gas. I wandered the streets, sleeping wherever I could. I didn't eat for days. I think that's when my mind created Anna. A defense mechanism. Anna had no traumatic past, no family she'd abandoned. Anna just needed to survive one day at a time." "Did you ever try to contact us?" Lucas asked. He tried to hide the hurt in his voice, but it was there. "Once," Rachel admitted. "Maybe 6 months later. I had a moment of clarity and called home from a payphone. When you answered, Lucas, I froze. I couldn't speak." Lucas paled. "I remember that call," he said. "It was an afternoon after school. I picked up and there was just breathing on the other end. Dad thought it was a prank call from a classmate." Rachel nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. After that, Anna took over completely. The memories of Rachel were buried so deep they only surfaced in dreams. Michael absorbed every word, trying to fathom the mental torment Rachel had endured. The woman he had loved, with whom he had built a life, had been suffering an internal hell he had never even suspected. "How did you get to Chicago?" he asked. "I worked odd jobs," Rachel answered. "A waitress in a diner in Wisconsin, a cleaner at a motel in Michigan. Eventually, about 10 years ago, I ended up in Chicago. I don't know if it was a coincidence or if some subconscious part of me led me back." "That's when we met," Ray interjected. "I'd been on the streets for a few years myself. The system isn't kind to vets with PTSD. Michael noticed the military insignia tattooed on Ray's forearm. "Afghanistan, first deployment," Ray explained, following Michael's gaze. "Came back with more demons than I could handle. Ray found me during a snowstorm," Rachel continued. "I was sick, running a high fever. He got me to a shelter, made sure I got medical attention. After that, we just looked out for each other." Michael watched the easy familiarity between them, born from years of mutual trust. He felt a pang of jealousy, immediately followed by a wave of gratitude. Without Ray, Rachel might not have survived. "So, what happens now?" Lucas asked, voicing the question that hung in the air. Rachel looked at Ray, then at Michael, and finally at Lucas. "I've been thinking a lot about that," she answered. "Ray and I have talked it over. I think I need professional help. I need to piece my identity back together, to reconcile Rachel with Anna." "There's a program at Northwestern Hospital," Michael said, "specializing in trauma and dissociative disorders. I could make some calls." Rachel nodded slowly. "I'd like that," she said. "And I'd also like to get to know my son, to really know him." Lucas smiled, his eyes wet with tears. "I'd like that too, Mom." The word Mom seemed to touch something deep in Rachel. Her face brightened for a moment before a shadow crossed it again. "There's something else you need to know," she said, her voice suddenly grave. "Something Ray has helped me remember." Michael and Lucas tensed, bracing for another painful revelation. "The reason the memories started to surface just before I disappeared," Rachel continued. "I think it was because I saw someone who reminded me of my father." "Who?" Michael asked. "His brother," Rachel replied. "My uncle, Robert. He looked so much like my father, and seeing him triggered everything." Michael frowned, confused. "Your Uncle Robert? You never mentioned your father had a brother." "Because I didn't remember," Rachel explained. "Or rather, my mind had blocked him out." She swallowed hard. He was part of the abuse too." A horrified silence fell over the table. Ray squeezed Rachel's hand in support. A few days before I disappeared, Rachel went on, I saw him at a mall. I didn't consciously recognize him, but something inside me reacted. I started having more intense nightmares, panic attacks. It was the final catalyst. Do you think he recognized you? Michael asked. Rachel shook her head. I don't know, but the fear that he might find me, that he might get near Lucas, it was too much. Lucas processed this new information with a grim expression. Do you know where he is now? He asked. No, Rachel replied, and I hope I never see him again. Ray, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke. I've been thinking Rachel should file a report, he said. I know her father is gone, but her uncle might still be out there. There could be other victims. Michael nodded slowly. That's a decision only you can make, he told Rachel. But we'd be with you, every step of the way. Rachel looked gratefully at the three men surrounding her, each offering support in his own way. One step at a time, she said finally. First, I need to put myself back together. Then I can face the past completely. Where will you stay in the meantime? Lucas asked. Rachel and Ray exchanged a look. We've been talking about that, Ray answered. I think Rachel needs space to reconnect with you two, to get proper treatment. There's a transitional housing program for veterans, Rachel added. Ray's been on the waiting list and he just got word that a spot opened up for him. Michael understood what they were saying. And you? He asked Rachel directly. She took a deep breath. I was wondering if... She hesitated, looking at Michael. If I could stay with you, just temporarily until I can get on my feet. The request took Michael by surprise. After 12 years without his wife, the idea of having her under his roof again, even as a familiar stranger, was overwhelming. Of course, he answered without hesitation. I have a guest room. It's yours for as long as you need. Lucas smiled, visibly relieved. I could come down from Champagne on weekends, he suggested. We could spend time together, get to know each other again. Rachel felt tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. I'd like that, she said. I'd like that very much. Ray watched the exchange, a mixture of emotions on his face. Michael recognized the pain of losing someone important, but he also saw acceptance and perhaps even hope. Ray, Michael said, turning to him, you'll always be welcome in my home. You took care of Rachel when we couldn't. That makes you family. The words seemed to startle Ray, who nodded briefly, the emotion clear in his eyes. Thank you, he replied simply. Rachel looked at the three men around her, and for the first time since their reunion, she offered a genuine, unreserved smile. It's strange, she remarked. For 12 years I felt completely alone, even with Ray by my side. There was a void I couldn't name. And now you're not alone anymore, Lucas finished for her. Rachel nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm not alone anymore, she repeated. 3 days later, Michael helped Rachel settle into the apartment. Her possessions fit into a small, worn backpack. A few items of clothing, a sketchbook, a well-read book of poetry. It's not much, she commented, embarrassed. It's a new start, Michael replied. That evening, sitting in the living room after a simple dinner, Rachel looked through the photographs Michael had kept all those years. Pictures of Lucas growing up, graduations, sports competitions, everyday moments she had missed. You've been a good father, she remarked, tracing a finger over a photo of Lucas at his high school graduation. I tried, Michael answered. There were hard days when the only thing I could do was keep going for him. Rachel looked at him, her eyes full of regret. I can never make up for the lost time, she said quietly. It's not about making up for it, Michael replied. It's about moving forward, all of us, together. Rachel nodded, wiping away a tear. I spoke with Dr. Stevens yesterday, the specialist you recommended, she said. I start therapy next week. I'll be there if you need me, Michael offered. Rachel smiled gratefully. I also spoke to a detective, she added, her voice tighter. About my uncle. They're investigating quietly. Michael took her hand in a gesture of support. You're stronger than you think, he told her. You always have been. Rachel looked at their intertwined hands. A gesture that had once been so natural now felt both familiar and strange. Michael, she began, her voice barely a whisper. What are we now? What will we be? It was the question Michael had been avoiding, the one he was afraid to ask himself. We're two people who once loved each other deeply, he answered with honesty. Two people who shared a life and a son. Two people who have changed, who have lived separate lives for 12 years, and now we're two people rediscovering each other. Rachel nodded, satisfied with the answer. One day at a time, she said. One day at a time, Michael confirmed. Outside, snow began to fall softly over Chicago, covering the city in a white blanket that seemed to symbolize a new beginning. Somewhere in the city, Ray was settling into his new housing, also starting a new chapter. And in Champaign, Lucas was sleeping with the certainty that he would see his mother again on the weekend. The story of Rachel Reynolds' disappearance was over. The story of her return was just beginning. Spring came to Chicago, melting the snow that had blanketed the city for months. Nearly 4 months had passed since Rachel had returned to Michael and Lucas's lives. 4 months of adjustments, discoveries, and gradual healing. Michael's guest room had subtly transformed. It was no longer an anonymous, temporary space, but showed small, personal touches. Books on the nightstand, a plant on the windowsill, a hand-knitted blanket that Ray had given Rachel for her birthday years ago. Simple details that reflected a woman rebuilding her identity piece by piece. It was Saturday morning, and Michael was making breakfast when Rachel entered the kitchen. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a University of Illinois sweatshirt Lucas had given her. Physically, she looked very different from the woman Michael had found on Lower Wacker Drive. She had gained weight, the color had returned to her skin, and her eyes held a clarity that had been absent before. Good morning, Rachel greeted, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Did Lucas say what time he's getting in? His train arrives at 11, Michael replied, flipping pancakes. He said he's bringing a friend, someone he wants you to meet. Rachel nodded, a mix of anticipation and nervousness on her face. Every meeting with Lucas was precious to her, an opportunity to get to know the man her son had become. I had another session with Dr. Stevens last night, she mentioned, sitting at the table. We're working with EMDR now. Michael looked at her with interest. He had educated himself on trauma therapies since Rachel's return, wanting to better understand her process. How was it? He asked. Intense, Rachel admitted, but effective. We're processing the memories of my father, transforming them from overwhelming experiences into just painful memories. That sounds like progress, Michael commented, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. Rachel smiled faintly. It is. We've also been exploring the lost years, integrating Anna with Rachel. Michael sat across from her, watching as she ate. These domestic moments still felt surreal, as if he could wake up at any moment and find it had all been a dream. Have you spoken with Ray this week? He asked. Rachel's expression softened. Yes, we saw each other on Wednesday. He's doing well. His housing program is working out, and he got a part-time job at a hardware store. Michael could see she was genuinely happy for Ray. In the months that had passed, he had come to deeply respect the man who had cared for Rachel when he couldn't. "I told him he's welcome to join us for dinner sometime," Michael said. "If he wants to, of course." Rachel looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you for that," she replied. "It means a lot to me that you two can get along." Michael understood. Ray was a crucial part of Rachel's life, an anchor during her darkest years. To exclude him would be to deny a significant part of who she was now. "Any news from Detective Peterson?" he asked, changing the subject. Rachel's expression grew more serious. "They located Robert," she answered. "He's living in Seattle now. They're investigating discreetly to see if there are other potential victims." Michael noticed how Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she mentioned her uncle. Despite months of therapy, some wounds were still raw. "How do you feel about that?" he asked gently. Rachel took a deep breath. "Scared," she admitted, "but also resolute. Dr. Stevens says facing this, seeking justice, is part of my healing." "We're with you," Michael reminded her, "every step of the way." Rachel nodded and they continued their breakfast in a comfortable silence. This was their new normal. Honest conversations about difficult topics, followed by moments of quiet companionship. It wasn't the marriage they once had, but it was something new, something they were both building day by day. After breakfast, Rachel helped clear the kitchen, then retreated to her room to get ready for Lucas's visit. Michael took the moment to check his email, where he found a message from the lawyer they had hired. "The papers are ready," the message read. "Rachel Reynolds officially exists again." Michael smiled. After months of legal work, they had managed to re-establish Rachel's legal identity. She was no longer a ghost in the system, without ID, without a history. Now she had a driver's license, a social security card, a bank account, small pieces of normalcy that most people took for granted, but which for Rachel represented a rebirth. The doorbell rang promptly at 11:30. Michael opened it to find Lucas beaming, accompanied by a young woman with dark hair and a kind expression. "Dad!" Lucas said, hugging Michael. "This is Mia Chen, my girlfriend." Michael shook the young woman's hand, noticing the nervousness in her smile. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mia," he said. "Lucas has told me a lot about you." "The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Reynolds," she replied. "Lucas has told me a great deal about you, too." Rachel appeared in the hallway, her expression a delicate balance of joy and apprehension. Lucas immediately closed the distance between them, wrapping her in a hug that still felt new yet more natural each time. "Mom, I want you to meet Mia," Lucas said, taking the young woman's hand. "My girlfriend." Rachel's face broke into a warm smile as she extended a hand of her own. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Mia," she said. "Please come in." The four of them moved into the living room. Lucas and Mia settled onto the sofa while Michael poured drinks and Rachel arranged a plate of appetizers on the coffee table. "Mia is studying clinical psychology," Lucas explained. "She's in her final year at the University of Illinois." "Really?" Rachel asked, her interest clearly piqued. "That must be a fascinating field." Mia nodded, visibly relaxing in the warmth of Rachel's welcome. "It is," she answered. "I'm currently interning at a center that works with trauma survivors." Michael watched his son, noticing the way Lucas looked at Mia with pride, and then at Rachel with a quiet hope. It was as if he had carefully chosen someone who could understand his mother's journey without an ounce of judgment. The conversation flowed easily as they sat down for lunch. Mia proved to be both intelligent and compassionate, asking thoughtful questions and listening with genuine interest to Rachel's answers. Lucas watched the interaction between the two most important women in his life, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. After lunch, While Lucas and Michael cleared the dishes in the kitchen, Rachel and Mia continued their conversation in the living room. Lucas told me a little about your situation, Mia began gently. I hope you don't mind. Rachel shook her head. Not at all, she replied. It's a part of who I am now. I can't hide it, nor do I want to. Mia nodded with an understanding that seemed to go beyond her years. My older sister went through something similar, she revealed. Not as extreme, but she also suffered from dissociative amnesia after a trauma. Watching her recovery process is what inspired me to study psychology. Rachel looked at her with renewed interest. How is she now? She asked. She's good, Mia said with a soft smile. It took time, years really, but she found her way back. She's married now, with 2 children, and while some wounds never fade completely, she's learned to live a full and beautiful life. Rachel absorbed these words like a ray of hope. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel completely myself again, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. There are days I still feel torn between Rachel and Anna. My trauma professor says it's not about going back to who you were before, Mia offered. It's about integrating all of your experiences into who you are now. Rachel smiled, recognizing the wisdom in the words. Your son is very lucky to have you, she said. A light blush touched Mia's cheeks. I'm the lucky one, she replied. Lucas is special. He has a good heart, Rachel agreed, like his father. In the kitchen, Lucas and Michael were finishing up. They seemed to be getting along, Lucas commented, glancing toward the living room where Rachel and Mia were talking animatedly. Mia seems wonderful, Michael said. I'm happy for you, son. Lucas smiled, though Michael caught a flicker of unease in his eyes. What is it? He asked. Lucas dried a plate slowly before answering. There's something I've been wanting to ask you, he said finally, about you and Mom. Michael waited, a sense of anticipation settling over him. Is there any chance you two will get back together? Lucas asked, his voice laced with the hope he'd carried since he was a boy. Michael sighed, searching for the right words. Lucas, your mother and I share a bond that will never completely disappear, he answered honestly. But we've both changed. It's been 12 years, we aren't the same people who got married. But you love her, Lucas pressed, not as a question, but as a statement. I will always love her, Michael admitted. But there are different kinds of love. Right now, we're learning how to be friends again, how to trust one another, and for now, that's enough. Lucas nodded slowly, processing his father's words. I guess a part of me always hoped that when we found her, everything would just go back to the way it was, he confessed. It's childish, I know. Michael placed a hand on his son's shoulder. It's not childish, it's human. We all want stories to have neat, happy endings, but real life is more complicated, and sometimes the happy ending doesn't look the way we imagined it would. They returned to the living room to find Rachel showing Mia some photographs Michael had unearthed from old albums. Lucas, look, Rachel exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. Your father found pictures from when you were 5. That dinosaur costume. Lucas blushed as Mia laughed with delight at the image of a small boy dressed as a Tyrannosaurus Rex for Halloween. The afternoon passed in a haze of laughter and conversation, creating new memories to fill the void of the lost years. When it was finally time for Lucas and Mia to head back to Champagne, the atmosphere was warm and relaxed. Next time, maybe you could come to our apartment, Mia suggested. It's not much, but we could cook for you. We would love that, Rachel replied, giving Mia a heartfelt hug goodbye. After they had gone, Michael and Rachel sat on the porch watching the spring sunset. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that can only exist between people who have shared so much pain and joy. Lucas has a good eye for people, Michael remarked. Mia is special. Rachel nodded, a gentle smile on her lips. She reminds me a little of myself at her age, she said quietly, before everything became so complicated. Michael studied her profile, the fading light softening the lines on her face. I have some news, he said, remembering the email. The lawyer confirmed that all your documents are ready. Officially, Rachel Reynolds exists again. Rachel's eyes lit up. Really? She asked, a tremor of emotion in her voice. Is everything settled? Michael nodded. Everything. They even managed to recover your credit history, and there's something else, he added, pulling an envelope from his pocket. This is for you. Rachel took the envelope. Her curiosity piqued. Inside, she found a debit card and a bank passbook. I don't understand, she said, looking up at him in confusion. When you disappeared, I never closed our joint account, Michael explained. I kept depositing a portion of my income into it, just in case you ever came back and needed it. Rachel stared at the passbook, at the considerable balance printed in black ink. Michael, I can't accept this, she began. It's not a gift, he interrupted gently. It's yours. It always was. Think of it as a fund for your new beginning. Rachel ran her fingers over the raised letters of her name on the card. Rachel Reynolds. Thank you, she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for this, for everything, for not giving up, for giving me the space to heal, for letting me get to know the man our son has become. Michael smiled. Speaking of new beginnings, he said, Dr. Stevens mentioned you're thinking about getting back into library science. Rachel's expression brightened. There's an assistant position at the Rogers Park Public Library, she explained. It's not much, but it would be a start. I've already sent in my application. That's wonderful, Michael said sincerely. You always loved books. Both Anna and Rachel love books, she commented with a wry smile. During the years on the street, libraries were my sanctuary. A warm, safe place where I could escape for a few hours. It was the first time she had spoken of Anna as an integral part of herself, not as a separate alien identity. Michael recognized the subtle shift as a profound sign of progress, of integration. Dr. Stevens says I'm ready for this step, Rachel continued. To go back to work, have a routine, build an independent life. Michael felt an unexpected pang at the word independent. He had grown accustomed to Rachel's presence in his apartment, to their shared breakfasts and quiet evening conversations. You're thinking of moving out, he stated, keeping his tone carefully neutral. Rachel looked at him, catching the nuance in his voice. Eventually, she answered softly. Not right away, but yes. I think I need to find my own space, to build a life that's truly my own. Michael nodded, understanding her need to reclaim her autonomy after so much of her life had been beyond her control. You know you'll always be welcome here, he said. This is your home as much as it is mine. Her grateful smile was luminous in the twilight. I know, she replied, and that means everything to me. The sky was deepening to purple as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of rose and gold. In the distance, the lights of Chicago began to glitter against the darkening skyline. I got a call from Detective Peterson this morning, Rachel said after a moment. They found another one of my uncle's victims. A woman in Portland who's willing to testify. Michael reached for her hand, his grip firm and supportive. What does that mean for the case? It means they have enough to proceed, she said, her voice steady. They've asked me to fly to Seattle next month to give a formal deposition. Do you feel ready for that? Michael asked, his concern evident. Rachel took a deep breath. No, she admitted honestly, but I'm going to do it anyway, not for revenge, but for justice and for myself. A wave of pride washed over Michael. He was in awe of the strength of this woman who, despite everything she had endured, was finding the courage to face her demons head-on. "I'll go with you," he offered, "if you want the company." She looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I'd like that," she said, "and maybe Lucas too, if he can get away from school." They sat in contemplative silence as night fell completely around them. This wasn't the fairy tale ending Lucas had imagined, Michael thought. There was no grand romantic reunion, no magical erasure of the past. Instead, there was something far more real. Two people damaged by life but not defeated by it, learning to exist in a new kind of relationship, one built on a foundation of mutual understanding, shared history, and profound respect. "You know," Rachel said finally, breaking the silence, "Mia said something that stuck with me. That recovery isn't about going back to who you were before, but about integrating all of your experiences into who you are now." Michael smiled, recognizing the truth in the words. "I like that," he replied. "I think we're all in a constant process of integrating and growing." Rachel nodded, her gaze fixed on the first stars beginning to appear in the night sky. "12 years is a long time," she murmured. "But somehow, sitting here with you, sometimes it feels like just yesterday we were sharing moments like this." "And sometimes," Michael added, "it feels like several lifetimes." Rachel smiled, a flash of the young woman he had known decades ago shining through the years of hardship. "Several lifetimes," she repeated. "What a fitting way to describe it." Seattle in May was colder than Rachel had anticipated. As the taxi moved from the airport toward the downtown hotel, she watched the city through a fogged window, its skyscrapers blurred by a persistent drizzle. Michael and Lucas sat on either side of her, their presence a silent, comforting weight. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, noticing the way her hands were clenched tightly around the purse in her lap. Rachel nodded, though the tension in her jaw betrayed her. "Just nervous," she admitted. "Tomorrow's the big day." Lucas, sitting on her other side, took her hand. "We'll be with you," he reminded her, "the whole time." The hotel was modest but comfortable, located just a few blocks from the district attorney's office where Rachel was scheduled to meet them the next day. They had booked 2 adjoining rooms, one for Rachel and one for Michael and Lucas to share. "We should get something to eat," Michael suggested after they had settled in. "There's a restaurant downstairs." Rachel shook her head. "I'm not hungry," she said, "but you two go ahead. I think I just need a moment alone." Michael and Lucas exchanged a worried glance. "We could order room service later," Lucas offered. "We don't have to go out." Rachel gave them a small, appreciative smile. "I'll be fine, really," she assured them. "I just need to process everything." Reluctantly, they agreed to give her the space she needed. Once she was alone, Rachel sat by the window watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. Tomorrow she would come face to face with the district attorney and the lead detective on the case against her uncle. She would have to dredge up memories she had spent decades trying to bury, first unconsciously and then with therapeutic intent. Dr. Stevens had prepared her as best she could. "You're not confronting your uncle directly," she had reminded her. "You're just speaking with professionals who want to help bring about justice." Still, the thought of Robert Chandler knowing she had stepped out of the shadows, that she was willing to speak about the abuse, stirred a primal fear deep inside her, a fear that had defined so much of her life, even when she hadn't known its source. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Ray. "Hey," she answered, her voice softening instantly. "How are you holding up?" Ray asked, his voice a warm, familiar rumble. "You make it to Seattle?" "Yeah, a couple of hours ago." Rachel replied. Michael and Lucas went down to get dinner. I'm just watching the rain. Nervous? He asked, already knowing the answer. Terrified, she admitted with a small, humorless laugh, but determined. That's my girl, Ray said, his voice full of pride. Remember what I always told you on the streets, one step at a time. Don't think about the whole mountain, just the next step in front of you. Rachel smiled, remembering how that simple advice had helped her survive for so many years. How's everything back there? She asked, grateful for the distraction. All good, Ray said. I got that promotion at the hardware store. I'm the evening shift supervisor now. Ray, that's wonderful, Rachel exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. They talked for several more minutes, Ray telling her about his new responsibilities and Rachel sharing details about the flight and the city. It was easy talking to Ray. It always had been. There were no expectations, no complicated history, just a simple, unwavering friendship that had been forged in the hardest of times. It was a friendship forged in the crucible of hardship, one that had survived even the revelation of her true identity. I'll call tomorrow after the meeting, Rachel promised as she said goodbye. I'll be waiting, Ray replied, Minty. And Rachel, I'm proud of you. I always have been. When Michael and Lucas returned, they found Rachel calmer, though a quiet apprehension still lingered in her eyes. We brought you soup and a sandwich, Lucas said, placing a bag on the table, just in case you change your mind about food. Rachel offered a grateful smile. Thank you. Maybe later. Do you want to go over what's going to happen tomorrow? Michael asked, sitting down across from her. Rachel nodded. Preparation and structure helped her feel more in control. Detective Peterson will meet us in the lobby at 9 a.m., Michael began. He'll take us to District Attorney Marquez's office, where you'll give your statement. Lucas and I will be in the room with you, unless you'd prefer we wait outside. I want you with me, Rachel answered without hesitation. All right, Michael continued. Afterwards, depending on how you feel, we can come back to the hotel or go for a walk. Our flight isn't until tomorrow afternoon, so we have time. Rachel appreciated how Michael presented options, giving her agency over the decisions. It was a consideration he had learned during their months living together, understanding that for someone who had lost so much control over her life, these small choices were significant. I'd like to visit Pike Place Market if there's time, she mentioned. Ray said it's impressive. Lucas smiled. Then that's what we'll do, he said. A little sightseeing after the hard work is done. That night, Rachel slept surprisingly well, as if her body had decided to hoard energy for the day ahead. When she awoke, the rain had stopped, though the sky remained a blanket of gray clouds. At 9 a.m. sharp, Detective Peterson greeted them in the hotel lobby. He was a middle-aged man with a kind, professional expression. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, shaking her hand, I deeply appreciate your courage in coming here today. Rachel nodded, a lump forming in her throat. I just want to do the right thing, she replied. The drive to the DA's office was short. Rachel sat between Michael and Lucas in the back of the official car, her hands clasped in theirs, anchoring her to the present as her mind threatened to drift into the past. District Attorney Marquez's office was bright and less intimidating than Rachel had imagined. The DA, a Latina woman in her 50s, received her with both professionalism and compassion. Mrs. Reynolds, I understand how difficult this must be for you, she said after the introductions. I want you to know that we will take every possible measure to protect your privacy and well-being during this process. Rachel was grateful for her words, though the tension in her body was palpable. Could you explain exactly what will happen today? She asked. The DA nodded, taking a seat behind her desk. Today we will take your formal statement regarding the abuse you suffered at the hands of Robert Chandler, she explained. This statement, along with the evidence gathered by Detective Peterson and the testimony of the other victim we've identified, will help us determine whether to proceed with criminal charges. And will he know that I've testified? Rachel asked, the question that tormented her most. Eventually, yes, the DA answered honestly. If we decide to move forward with the case, your name will appear in the official documents. However, we can request protective measures for you. Rachel nodded, appreciating the frankness. And what are the chances he'll go to prison? The DA exchanged a look with the detective before answering. Historical child abuse cases are complex, she admitted, especially when decades have passed. But we have the testimony of two unrelated victims with similar patterns of abuse, which strengthens the case significantly. Rachel took a deep breath, absorbing the information. I'm ready, she said finally. For the next 3 hours, Rachel narrated her story. Her voice, trembling at first, grew progressively steadier as she described the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her father and uncle during her childhood. She explained how her mind had blocked many of these memories as a defense mechanism, and how the stress triggered by seeing her uncle years later had led to her psychological crisis and subsequent disappearance. Michael and Lucas remained by her side, their expressions shifting between horror at the details they had never heard and pride in the strength Rachel was demonstrating. In the most difficult moments, when the words caught in her throat, one or the other would gently squeeze her hand, a silent reminder that she was no longer alone in her pain. When she finally finished, a heavy silence settled over the room. District Attorney Marquez, visibly moved despite her professionalism, was the first to speak. Mrs. Reynolds, your testimony has been incredibly valuable, she said, and your courage is extraordinary. Detective Peterson nodded in agreement. We've been monitoring Robert Chandler for months, he added. Your statement confirms patterns we had already identified. I firmly believe we have enough to proceed. Rachel felt exhausted but strangely light, as if she had set down a weight she had carried for decades. What happens now? Michael asked. We'll prepare the case to present to the grand jury, the DA explained. If they issue a formal indictment, we'll proceed with an arrest. This could all take several weeks. And will I have to be there when he's arrested? Rachel asked. No, the detective replied quickly. You don't need to be physically present at any point, and we will inform you immediately when the arrest is made. Rachel felt a wave of relief. When they finally left the building, it was nearly noon. The Seattle sky was still overcast, but to Rachel, the light seemed brighter, the air fresher. How are you feeling? Lucas asked, studying her face with concern. Rachel considered the question for a moment. Tired, she answered honestly, but also lighter, like I've left something behind that I'd been dragging around for years. Michael smiled in understanding. Still want to go to the market? He asked. Or we could head back to the hotel if you'd rather rest. Rachel looked around at the vibrant city, which continued its course, oblivious to the momentous event she had just lived through. The market, she decided. I need to be around people to see normal life after all of that. Pike Place Market was buzzing with activity despite the gray day. Stalls of fresh fish where vendors tossed enormous salmon to each other for the tourists' entertainment, flower shops bursting with color, local artisans displaying their creations. Rachel absorbed it all eagerly, as if every sight, every scent, every sound helped to anchor her back in the present. After reliving such a painful past, they stopped to eat at a small restaurant with a view of the water. For the first time since they had arrived in Seattle, Rachel had an appetite as they shared a simple but delicious meal. The conversation flowed naturally, avoiding the topic of the statement by unspoken agreement. Lucas talked about his plans for the summer, an internship at an engineering firm in Chicago that would let him be close to home. Michael mentioned a classic car he was restoring in his workshop, a '67 Mustang that had been his dream project for years. Sounds like you both have your summers planned, Rachel commented with a smile. I have some news too, though I haven't shared it yet. Father and son looked at her expectantly. I heard from the library in Rogers Park, she announced. They offered me the job. I start in 2 weeks. Mom, that's wonderful, Lucas exclaimed, his face lighting up. Michael beamed. Congratulations, Rachel, he said with sincerity. I'm so happy for you. Rachel smiled back, a warmth spreading through her chest. These small achievements, which might seem trivial to many, were giant steps for her in rebuilding her life. And there's something else, she added after a moment. I've been looking at apartments. I found a small but cozy place in the same neighborhood as the library. It's within my budget with the new salary and the fund you gave me. Michael nodded slowly, processing the news. Although they had discussed the eventuality of Rachel moving out, the imminent reality of her departure stirred mixed feelings. That's great news, he said finally, forcing an enthusiastic tone. When would you move? At the end of the month, if all goes to plan, Rachel replied. I wanted to wait until after this trip to make the final decision, but now it feels like the right time. Lucas watched the exchange with a thoughtful expression. You'll only be a few miles away, right? He asked. It's not like you're going to disappear from our lives. Rachel caught the hint of anxiety in his voice and hurried to reassure him. Of course not, she affirmed vehemently. We'll still see each other regularly, family dinners, more weekends, none of that will change. I need to start building my own life, my independence. Michael understood Rachel's need completely. Over these months, he had watched her gradual transformation from a fragile, disoriented woman to someone slowly reclaiming her confidence and autonomy. It was a process he had encouraged and supported, even knowing it would eventually mean letting her go. We're happy for you, he said, and this time his smile was genuine. And we'll always be here to support you, whatever path you choose. The rest of the afternoon passed in a relaxed atmosphere as they explored the market and the surrounding streets. By the time they returned to the hotel, the tension of the morning had largely dissipated, replaced by a satisfied weariness. That evening, Rachel called Ray to tell him about the statement and her plans for the apartment. Michael, passing in the hallway on his way to his room, paused involuntarily as he overheard her conversation. It was hard, but necessary, Rachel was saying. I don't know how to explain it, like I've closed a chapter that was left unfinished for too long. There was a pause as she listened to Ray's reply. Yes, I told them about the apartment, she continued. They were understanding, as always. Michael especially has been so patient through this whole process. Another pause. No, I don't think we'll ever get back together in that way, she answered a question Michael couldn't hear. Too much has changed. We've both changed. But there's an affection, a mutual respect that's maybe more valuable than what we had before. Michael moved away silently, processing what he had just heard. Rachel's words confirmed what he himself felt, a deep affection that had evolved beyond the romantic love they once shared, transforming into something different but just as meaningful. The next morning, as they waited at the airport to return to Chicago, Rachel received a call from Detective Peterson. Mrs. Reynolds, he said, his tone urgent, there's something you need to know. Rachel felt her heart accelerate. What is it? She asked, drawing the worried glances of Michael and Lucas. Robert Chandler was found dead in his apartment this morning, the detective reported. It appears he took his own life last night. Rachel stood frozen, the news hitting her like a physical wave. Are you sure? She managed to ask. Completely, Peterson confirmed. He left a note confessing to the abuse. He mentioned he'd been contacted by colleagues who knew the other victim, and he knew the case was being investigated. Apparently, he decided he couldn't face the consequences. Rachel sank slowly into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Michael and Lucas were instantly at her side, alarmed by her pallor. "Thank you for letting me know," she said finally, her voice distant even to her own ears. What happens now?" "The case will be officially closed," the detective answered. "But your statement was not in vain, Mrs. Reynolds. The confession in his note validates your testimony and that of the other victim. And most importantly, you confronted your past. That courage isn't diminished by the outcome." After hanging up, Rachel looked at Michael and Lucas, who were waiting expectantly. "Robert is dead," she said simply. "He killed himself." A stunned silence followed her words. "How do you feel?" Michael finally asked, the only question that mattered. Rachel contemplated it, searching within herself for an honest answer. "I don't know," she admitted. "There's relief, of course. I'll never have to see him. I'll never have to sit in a courtroom and relive it all again. But there's also a sense of anticlimax, as if the end came too easily for him." Lucas nodded, his expression full of understanding. "It's complicated," he said, "but the important thing is that you took the step. You faced your fear." Rachel smiled faintly. "Yes," she agreed, "and whatever the outcome, that's something no one can take away from me." During the flight back to Chicago, Rachel was mostly silent, processing the news and its implications. Robert Chandler's death was the final end to a dark chapter of her life, but it also raised new questions about forgiveness, justice, and closure. By the time the plane landed in Chicago, she had reached a kind of inner peace. It wasn't the perfect closure she might have imagined, but it was closure nonetheless. And more importantly, it was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one she was now writing herself, page by page, decision by decision. "Home sweet home," Lucas murmured as they collected their luggage. Rachel looked at her son and then at Michael, who was handling the bags with the same steady care he had shown through all these months. "Yes," she replied softly. "Home." And for the first time in many, many years, the word felt whole and true. The small apartment in Rogers Park smelled of fresh paint and new wood. Rachel watched as Lucas and Michael positioned the last bookshelf next to the window, which overlooked a nearby park. The space was modest, a living dining area, a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a bath. But to Rachel, it represented so much more than four walls. It was her declaration of independence, her first truly personal home in over 12 years. "I think that's everything," Michael declared, stepping back to admire the newly installed shelf. "Where do you want us to put the books?" Rachel smiled, gazing at the boxes labeled "Books Waiting to be Unpacked." Over the past few months, she had begun to rebuild her collection. Some titles salvaged from her former life, many others new, reflecting the person she was becoming. "I'll arrange them myself," she said. "That'll be a project for the next few days." Lucas, who had been unpacking dishes in the kitchen, joined them in the living room. "Everything's almost set," he commented, draping an arm around his mother's shoulders. "How does it feel?" Rachel took a deep breath, absorbing the reality of her new situation. "It feels right," she answered honestly. "Terrifying and exciting all at once." Michael smiled with understanding. Over the past week, while helping Rachel with the move, he had been processing his own conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was genuinely happy for this major step in her recovery. On the other, he had grown accustomed to her daily presence, to their conversations over breakfast, to the simple comfort of knowing she was under the same roof. "The supermarket is just 2 blocks away," he remarked, gesturing out the window. And there's a cafe on the corner that looks nice, and you're a 15-minute walk from the library," Lucas added. "It's perfect." Rachel nodded, grateful for their shared enthusiasm. They had been tireless in their support, from helping her find the apartment to shopping for furniture, and now, settling everything in. Yet she knew that beneath their support lay a certain apprehension, especially from Lucas, the unspoken fear that this physical separation might somehow foreshadow another disappearance. "I was thinking," she said, turning particularly to her son, "maybe we could start a weekly family dinner. Sundays, perhaps, we could rotate between this apartment, your dad's place, and yours and Mia's." Lucas's face lit up. "I'd love that," he replied, his enthusiasm clear. "Mia will love the idea too." Michael nodded in agreement. "That's an excellent idea," he said. "And you know you're welcome at my place anytime, not just on designated Sundays." Rachel smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. These small rituals, these promises of continuity were essential for rebuilding the family's trust. "I was also thinking," she continued, reaching into her purse and pulling out a small object. It was a set of 3 new keys. "We should have these. This one is for you," she said, handing one to Lucas. "And this one for you," she added, offering another to Michael. "So you know you're always welcome here, that this is an open space for you." Lucas took the key, his eyes shining, clearly moved by the gesture. Michael accepted his with a grateful smile, understanding the deeper meaning. Rachel wasn't running away. She was creating a new space where they could all exist together just differently. "I think this calls for a celebration," Michael declared. "What do you say we order some dinner? I saw a Thai place on the way over that looked promising." While Michael made the call, Lucas helped Rachel set the small dining table. It had been a gift from Mia, a hand-woven tablecloth in shades of blue and green that perfectly complemented the freshly painted walls. "You look happy, Mom," Lucas commented as he set down the plates. Rachel looked at her son, a young man of 20 now, but in moments like this, he reminded her of the 8-year-old boy she had left behind. "I am," she confirmed. "It's not a perfect or complete happiness, but it's real. And that's what matters." Lucas nodded, understanding. "Dr. Stevens says I'm still making progress," Rachel continued. "The nightmares are less frequent, and the episodes of dissociation have practically vanished." "I'm glad to hear that," Lucas replied sincerely. A comfortable silence fell between them as they finished setting the table. Then Lucas spoke again. "Mia and I are thinking about moving in together after graduation," he said, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "We're looking for an apartment near where she'll be doing her clinical practicum." Rachel smiled, happy to be included in these future plans, these important moments in her son's life. "She's a wonderful girl," she commented. "You have good taste, like your father." Lucas chuckled softly. "Speaking of Dad," he said, lowering his voice, though Michael was still in the kitchen on the phone, "have you noticed how he's been acting lately?" Rachel furrowed her brow, confused. "What do you mean?" "More distracted, I guess," Lucas explained. "And last week when I went over for dinner, there were fresh flowers in the living room and he was humming while he cooked." Rachel's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Do you think he's seeing someone?" she asked, feeling an unexpected pang she couldn't quite identify. Lucas shrugged. "I don't know," he answered. "But if he is, that would be a good thing, right? It's been 12 years. He deserves to be happy." Rachel nodded slowly. "Of course," she said, and she meant it. "Of course he does." Their conversation was cut short as Michael returned to the room. "Food will be here in about 30 minutes, he announced. "I ordered a bit of everything. I hope that's okay." Rachel smiled, masking the strange mix of emotions the talk with Lucas had stirred. "Perfect," she replied. In the meantime, how about we open that bottle of wine Ray brought over? Ray had visited the apartment the day before, bringing a bottle of red wine and a small plant for the windowsill as a housewarming gift. His visit had been brief but meaningful, another sign of how all the pieces of Rachel's life were finding a new balance. Michael uncorked the bottle while Rachel found the glasses they had just unpacked. The wine was poured and the three of them raised their glasses in a toast. To new beginnings, Michael proposed. To family, Lucas added. To finding the way back home, Rachel completed, her voice soft but firm. The glasses clinked, and the evening light streaming through the window bathed the scene in golden hues, creating an image Rachel knew she would keep in her memory as a perfect moment in her imperfect life. Rachel's first day at the Rogers Park Public Library dawned sunny and warm, a June day that seemed to bless her new start. She had woken early, nervous but excited, and had spent more time than necessary choosing her outfit. A navy blue dress with a light cardigan, professional yet approachable. When she arrived, she was greeted by the director, Eleanor Patel, a woman with a kind smile and perceptive eyes. "Welcome, Rachel," Eleanor said, guiding her through the building. "We're so glad to have you with us. Your previous experience in Oak Park will be very valuable." Rachel smiled, appreciating the comment as she took in the atmosphere. The neatly arranged shelves, the children's area with its colorful cushions, the tables where students and seniors shared space in harmonious coexistence. There was something deeply comforting about being surrounded by books again, as if an essential part of herself had finally clicked back into place. "We'll be assigning you primarily to the reference desk and the children's reading program," Eleanor explained. "Based on your interview, I think that's where you'll thrive." Rachel nodded, remembering how she had mentioned her passion for connecting young readers with the right books. The day passed in a whirlwind of instructions, introductions, and learning new systems. By the time closing time arrived, Rachel felt exhausted but deeply satisfied. She had helped an elderly woman find a specific biography, assisted a group of school children with a research project, and had begun to familiarize herself with the digital catalog. Walking back to her apartment, she stopped at the small cafe on the corner. It was a cozy place with exposed brick walls and hanging plants. She ordered a tea and sat by the window, watching the passers-by as she reflected on the significant day. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. "How was your first day? Lucas and I are on the edge of our seats." Rachel smiled, picturing father and son debating whether they should call or give her space. "Wonderful," she typed back. "Tiring but rewarding. I'll tell you all about it at dinner on Sunday." She had barely sent the message when her phone rang. This time it was Ray. "Hello, stranger," she greeted as she answered. "Hello, librarian," Ray replied, the smile evident in his voice. "Did you conquer the literary world today?" Rachel laughed, always appreciating Ray's simple, direct way of communicating. "Something like that," she answered. "How was your day?" As Ray told her about a particularly difficult customer at the hardware store, Rachel gazed out the window, noticing how the light was changing as the sun began to set. A year ago, she had been living on the streets, no identity, no past, no future. The transformation was almost too vast to fully comprehend. "You still there?" Ray asked, noticing her silence. "Yeah, sorry," Rachel replied. "I was just thinking about how much everything has changed." Ray made a sound of understanding. "For the better, I hope," he commented. "For the better," Rachel confirmed, "though sometimes it still feels fragile, like it could all just fade away." "That's normal," Ray said with the wisdom of someone who had lost and rebuilt his own life several times. "But every day that passes, every routine you build, every relationship you nurture, it all adds to the safety net. Eventually, it'll be strong enough to hold you, even on the bad days." Rachel smiled, grateful for his perspective. When did you get so wise? She teased. I always was, Ray replied with mock indignation. You were just too busy being Anna to notice. The mention of Anna no longer brought discomfort. With Dr. Stevens's help, Rachel had come to see Anna not as a false identity or an imposter, but as a part of herself that had emerged to protect her when she needed it most. Anna was part of her story, not an aberration to be erased. You know, she said after a moment, a colleague asked me where I worked before. I told her I'd been out of the workforce for personal reasons. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole story either. I wonder if I'll ever be able to share that part of my life with new people. You will, when the time is right, and with the right people, Ray answered. Not every part of our story needs to be known by everyone. Rachel nodded, though Ray couldn't see her. Thanks for calling, she said finally. It meant a lot. That's what friends are for, Ray replied simply. After hanging up, Rachel finished her tea and walked the few remaining blocks to her apartment. Night had fallen completely, but the streetlights illuminated her path. And for the first time in a very long time, the darkness held no anxiety for her. The weeks turned into months. Summer gave way to autumn, and the routine Rachel had established solidified. Work at the library during the week, family dinners on Sundays rotating between her apartment, Michael's, and the one Lucas and Mia now shared. Sessions with Dr. Stevens every 2 weeks instead of weekly. Occasional outings with Ray when their schedules aligned. One October afternoon, as she was shelving newly returned books, Eleanor approached her with a proposal that took her by surprise. We're thinking of expanding our reading program to include a special group for adults dealing with trauma, she explained. A kind of bibliotherapy. When you mentioned your interest in psychology during your interview, I thought you might be interested in leading it. Rachel considered the proposal. In the months since she'd started, she had shared a few details of her story with Eleanor, who had responded with nothing but understanding and support. The idea of using literature as a healing tool resonated deeply with her. I'd love to, she replied, but I don't have any formal training in therapy or counseling. Eleanor smiled. That won't be necessary, she clarified. We'd be working with a psychologist from the community center who would oversee the therapeutic aspect. Your role would be to select appropriate readings and facilitate the discussions. Your personal experience would be invaluable if you feel comfortable sharing it. Rachel felt a mix of nervousness and excitement at the thought of transforming her trauma into something that could help others. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, Eleanor replied. Take all the time you need. That evening, during her turn to host the family dinner, Rachel shared the proposal with Michael, Lucas, and Mia. I think that would be wonderful, Mia opined immediately. Literature can be incredibly therapeutic. In my practicum, I see how narratives help people process their own experiences. Lucas nodded in agreement. Besides, who better than you to understand what they're going through? He added. Rachel looked at Michael, who had remained thoughtful. What do you think? She asked him. Michael considered his answer carefully. I think you could make a significant difference, he said finally. But I also worry about the emotional cost to you. Constantly reliving your trauma through the stories of others. Rachel appreciated his concern. I'll discuss it with Dr. Stevens, she promised. See what he thinks from a therapeutic perspective. The conversation drifted to other topics, but the idea stayed with Rachel. For months, she had viewed her trauma primarily as something to overcome, to leave behind. The possibility of transforming it into a tool to help others offered a new perspective. Later, as Michael helped her with the dishes after Lucas and Mia had left, she brought it up again. You know, I've been thinking, she began. When I disappeared, it was because my mind couldn't integrate my trauma. Now, with help, I'm learning to integrate it into my story. Maybe this program is another form of integration. Michael nodded, drying a plate thoughtfully. That makes sense, he conceded. I just want to make sure you don't push yourself too hard. You've come so far. Rachel smiled, touched by his constant care. I'll be careful, she promised, and I'll always have my safety net. You, Lucas, Ray, Dr. Stevens. Michael smiled back, and for a moment an indefinable something passed between them. A silent acknowledgement of the deep connection that endured despite everything. By the way, Rachel said, remembering her conversation with Lucas months ago. Lucas mentioned that you might be seeing someone. I hope you don't mind me asking. He looked surprised, then slightly embarrassed. No, not exactly, he replied. I've been seeing someone, but not romantically. She's a therapist. Now it was Rachel's turn to be surprised. Oh, she said, not knowing what else to say. After you came back, after everything you told me, I realized I had things to process too, Michael explained. 12 years of unanswered questions, of guilt for not seeing the signs, of learning to be a single father. I thought I'd handled it all, but your return brought to light just how much I'd buried. A wave of affection and respect washed over Rachel for this man who had been her anchor for so long. I'm glad you sought help, she said sincerely. We all need to process and heal, not just me. Michael nodded, visibly relieved by her reaction. It's been helpful, he admitted. It's helped me better understand my own feelings. About everything. About us. About the future. Rachel sensed there was more Michael wanted to say, but she didn't press. They were both learning to respect each other's timing and space, to communicate with honesty but without expectation. Speaking of the future, Michael said, shifting the topic slightly, have you thought about going back to school? You always wanted to finish your master's in library science. Rachel smiled at the memory. It had been a dream she'd postponed when Lucas was born, planning to pick it up again when he was older. Life, it turned out, had other plans. Actually, yes, she admitted. I've been looking into online programs. With my current job and my previous experience, I could get advanced credits. A wide smile spread across Michael's face. That's wonderful news, he said with enthusiasm. I always knew you'd get back to it eventually. Rachel was moved by his unwavering faith in her, even after all that had happened. Thank you for believing in me, she said softly, even when I couldn't. Michael looked at her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. Always, he replied simply. They finished cleaning up in a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, yet deeply aware of the other's presence, of the connection that continued to evolve between them. After Michael left, Rachel sat by her living room window, watching the city lights twinkle to life. She replayed their conversation, reflecting on the changes still unfolding in their interconnected lives. She thought of the bibliotherapy program, of the possibility of returning to her studies, of Michael seeking his own healing. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Dr. Stevens, confirming their appointment for the following week. Rachel replied and then, on impulse, sent another message asking about the bibliotherapy program and if they could discuss it at their next session. While she waited for a response, she got up and walked over to the bookshelf that Michael and Lucas had installed the day she moved in. It was now completely full, some books old, recovered from her former life, many new, acquired over the last few months. She ran her fingers over the spines, feeling the different textures, admiring the variety of stories held within their pages. Her gaze settled on one particular book, a blank journal Dr. Stevens had given her at the start of her therapy. She had started writing in it, sporadically at first, then with more regularity. It wasn't exactly a diary, but more a collection of reflections, recovered memories, and hopes for the future. She took it down and sat by the window again. Opening to a fresh page, she began to write. Tonight, for the first time, I could imagine a future not defined by my past. A future where my trauma isn't just something to overcome, but an experience that has given me a unique perspective, one that might help others. I don't know exactly what that future will look like, but for the first time, I'm genuinely excited to find out. The auditorium of the Rogers Park Public Library was softly lit, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. About 20 people occupied the chairs arranged in a semicircle, each holding a copy of the same book. In the center, Rachel Reynolds waited patiently as the last few participants settled in. "Welcome to our therapeutic reading group," she began, her voice calm yet firm. "For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Rachel, and I'll be your facilitator along with Dr. Harris." Dr. Harris, a middle-aged psychologist from the community center, nodded from his seat beside her. "This week's book," Rachel continued, "explores themes of loss, identity, and rediscovery. Before we begin our discussion, I'd like to share something personal that resonates with this story." She took a deep, centering breath. After nearly a year of leading this group, she had learned to share parts of her experience without becoming overwhelmed. It was a delicate balance, one she had honed with practice and Dr. Stevens's continued support. "Almost 5 years ago, after being missing for 12 years, I was reunited with my family." She began, noticing the new members lean forward, slightly intrigued. "During those 12 years, I lived as someone else, with no memory of my previous life. The process of rediscovering who I was, of integrating my past with my present, was the greatest challenge I've ever faced." A murmur of empathy rippled through the group. Several regular attendees who already knew parts of her story nodded in understanding. "What I discovered and what this book illustrates so beautifully," she went on, "is that identity isn't something fixed or unchangeable. It's an ongoing process of integration and growth. Our experiences, even the traumatic ones, aren't just obstacles to overcome, they are integral parts of who we become." The discussion that followed was lively and emotional. Rachel watched with satisfaction as the participants connected with the story and with each other, sharing their own experiences of loss and rediscovery. Dr. Harris interjected occasionally with clinical insights, but mostly allowed the conversation to flow naturally. When the session concluded 2 hours later, several people approached Rachel to thank her or ask further questions. It was rewarding to see how the group had evolved from its tentative beginnings a year ago into this vibrant, cohesive community of support. "Excellent session, as always," Dr. Harris commented as they gathered their materials. "Your ability to create a safe space where people feel comfortable sharing is remarkable." Rachel smiled gratefully. "Having a shared experience helps," she replied modestly. "They know I'm not just theorizing from the outside." "It's more than that," Dr. Harris insisted. "It's a natural skill. Have you considered my suggestion about getting a formal certification in bibliotherapy?" Rachel nodded. "In fact, I was just accepted into the online certification program," she revealed. "I start next semester along with my master's classes." Dr. Harris beamed. "That's wonderful. Congratulations. It will be a perfect complement to your library science degree." "Thank you," Rachel said. "I'm excited, though a little nervous about managing it all." "You'll do brilliantly," Dr. Harris affirmed with confidence. "And remember, you can always adjust the pace if it becomes too much." Rachel thanked him for his support and finished tidying her materials. As she walked to her office in the library, she reflected on how much her life had changed in the past 2 years. From living on the streets with no identity to having a steady job, her own home, Advanced studies on the horizon and, most importantly, meaningful relationships rebuilt with her son and with Michael. In her small office, Rachel checked her calendar. It was Friday, which meant Lucas and Mia were coming for dinner. They had established this monthly tradition in addition to the regular Sunday family dinners. Lucas, now a senior in college, and Mia, in her clinical psychology graduate program, were busier than ever, but they always made time for these get-togethers. As she finished some administrative tasks, her desk phone rang. "Reference desk, Rachel Reynolds speaking," she answered automatically. "Ms. Reynolds, it's Eleanor," the library director said. "Could you stop by my office before you leave? There's something I'd like to discuss." "Of course," Rachel replied, intrigued by Eleanor's formal tone. She was usually quite casual in their daily interactions. 15 minutes later, Rachel left Eleanor's office in a state of mingled shock and excitement. The director had offered her a promotion, Community Outreach Coordinator, a new position overseeing all of the library's special programs, including the therapeutic reading group Rachel had so successfully developed. "The success of your program has caught the board's attention," Eleanor had explained. "They want to expand similar initiatives, and they believe you're the ideal person to lead them." It was a significant validation not just of her work over the past year, but of her personal and professional growth. Rachel had accepted gratefully, though she asked for a few days to consider the logistics, especially with her upcoming studies. Walking toward her apartment, Rachel decided to take a detour through the nearby park. It was an exceptionally beautiful May evening, with the sun filtering through the new leaves on the trees and wildflowers dotting the grass. She sat on a bench, savoring the quiet moment before the lively dinner that awaited her. She pulled out her phone and called Michael to share the news. "Rachel, that's wonderful," he exclaimed when she told him about the promotion. "I knew they'd recognize your talent eventually." Rachel smiled at his enthusiasm. "Thanks," she replied. "I'm thrilled, though a little worried about juggling it with my studies." "You'll manage," Michael stated with the same unwavering faith he had always shown her. "And you know you have all of our support." "I know," Rachel said softly. "I couldn't have done it without you." A brief silence hung between them, one of those moments when words felt inadequate to express the depth of shared feeling. "Are we still on for this weekend?" Michael asked finally. Rachel smiled at the change of subject. "Of course," she confirmed. "Lucas and Mia are coming for dinner tonight, and Sunday we're all meeting at your place to celebrate your birthday." "About that," Michael said, a sudden note of nervousness in his voice. "I was wondering if you could come a little early on Sunday. There's something I want to show you." His tone piqued her curiosity. "Sure," she answered. "What time were you thinking? Maybe noon?" he suggested. "The others will be there around 2. "I'll be there," Rachel promised, intrigued but respecting his apparent desire not to elaborate over the phone. After hanging up, Rachel lingered a moment longer in the park, soaking in the peace of her surroundings. Despite her initial worries, her relationship with Michael had found a healthy equilibrium. It wasn't the marriage they once had, but it wasn't a simple friendship either. It was something unique, forged through shared, extraordinary experiences of loss and rediscovery. Dinner with Lucas and Mia was cheerful and relaxed. Rachel had made lasagna, Lucas's favorite since he was a boy, and Mia had brought a homemade dessert. "So, when do you start the new position?" Lucas asked, helping himself to a second serving. "Officially in July," Rachel answered, "but Eleanor wants me to start planning some new programs right away." "That's an incredible acknowledgement," Mia commented, "especially since you've been there less than 2 years." Rachel smiled, knowing it was true. "I think the therapeutic reading group was the deciding factor," she explained. "It's had a real impact on the community." "I'm not surprised," Lucas said with pride. You've always had a gift for connecting with people through books. I remember that from when I was a kid. A warmth spread through Rachel's chest at the shared memory. Every time Lucas mentioned moments from his childhood that included her, it was like reclaiming a precious piece of lost time. Speaking of exciting news, Mia said, exchanging a look with Lucas, we have something to share too. Rachel looked at them expectantly, noticing Lucas take Mia's hand across the table. We're engaged, Lucas announced, his face lit by a radiant smile. Last night. Rachel's breath caught, emotion flooding her. Oh, Lucas, Mia, she exclaimed, getting up to hug them both. That's wonderful. Mia held out her hand, showing off a simple but elegant ring with a small blue stone. We wanted you to be the first to know, she said. Well, after my parents, we're planning to tell Dad on Sunday at his birthday celebration, Lucas added. I hope you don't mind keeping it a secret until then. Rachel smiled, touched by their thoughtfulness in including her in such a meaningful way. Of course not, she promised. I'm so happy for you both. The conversation naturally drifted to wedding plans, though Lucas and Mia clarified it would be a long engagement, likely waiting until they had both finished their degrees. We're thinking something small, Mia explained. Just close family and a few friends. That sounds perfect, Rachel said, picturing it. As she served dessert, Rachel couldn't help but marvel at the irony. For years, she had feared that her disappearance had irreparably damaged Lucas, that the trauma of growing up without a mother would have compromised his ability to form healthy relationships. Yet here was her son, well-adjusted and loving, engaged to a wonderful woman, building a life based on trust and mutual respect. Later, after Lucas and Mia had left, Rachel called Ray to share the day's news, both her promotion and Lucas's engagement, trusting Ray's discretion with the latter. Sounds like things are finally falling into place for everyone, Ray commented with satisfaction. It seems so, Rachel agreed. Sometimes it still amazes me how far we've come. Ray chuckled softly. Remember when we first met? He asked. You were so lost, so scared. If someone had told me then that one day you'd be celebrating your son's engagement and a job promotion, I probably wouldn't have believed it. Rachel smiled at the memory, now able to look back on it without the sharp pain it once provoked. You were the first one to see something in me, she said softly. Even when I saw nothing in myself. I saw a survivor, Ray corrected. Someone who refused to give up, even when she couldn't remember what she was fighting for. After talking with Ray, Rachel got ready for bed, her mind processing the day's events. Before turning in, she checked her calendar for the coming week, adding a note to meet with Eleanor to discuss the details of her new role. She also marked a tentative start date for her bibliotherapy certification courses. Her life had taken on a structure and purpose that had once seemed unattainable. Each day brought new challenges, but also new joys and discoveries. It was a life she had built carefully, piece by piece, relationship by relationship. Sunday dawned bright and warm, a perfect day for a celebration. Rachel dressed with care, choosing a green-hued sundress she knew Michael liked. She had bought his gift weeks ago, a special leather-bound edition of his favorite Kurt Vonnegut novel she'd found at a specialty bookstore. She arrived at Michael's house just after noon as they had arranged. The moment he opened the door, Rachel saw it, a flicker of something different in his expression, a blend of nervousness and anticipation that instantly piqued her curiosity. "Happy birthday," she said, handing him a carefully wrapped package. Michael's smile was warm as he accepted the gift, kissing her cheek in gratitude. "Thank you for coming early," he said, welcoming her inside. "There's something I want to show you before everyone else gets here." Rachel followed him into the house they had once shared. Though Michael had made a few changes over the years, The space still held the echoes of their life together. The dining table where they'd shared countless family dinners. The sofa where they'd read stories to Lucas. To her surprise, Michael led her not through the house but out to the backyard. Rachel's breath caught at the transformation. The once simple space was now beautifully landscaped, with flowering plants bordering a stone path that led to a small glass greenhouse in the corner. "Michael, this is beautiful," she commented, admiring the clear effort he had invested. "When did you do all this?" "I've been working on it for months," he replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "But the greenhouse is new. I just finished installing it last week." He guided her along the path toward the glass structure. Stepping inside, Rachel was surprised to find an intimate, cozy space. Shelves held plants in various stages of growth. A small table with 2 chairs sat invitingly. And in the center, one particular plant immediately captured her attention. "Is that?" she began, stepping closer in awe. "A moon orchid," Michael confirmed, "like the one we had when we got married." Rachel gazed at it, mesmerized. The delicate white flower, with a center that seemed to glow in the light filtering through the glass, was identical to the one they had nurtured together during the first years of their marriage, a wedding gift they had tended with devotion. "It took me almost a year to find one," Michael explained. "Apparently they're quite rare." Rachel looked at him, moved by the gesture and the shared memory it evoked. "It's gorgeous," she said softly. "Thank you for showing me this." Michael nodded, a faint blush coloring his cheeks. "There's more," he confessed, gesturing to the small table where a polished wooden box rested. "Open it." Curiosity sparked. Rachel approached and lifted the lid. Inside, carefully arranged, was a collection of objects she instantly recognized. The star-shaped pendant Michael had given her for their 5th anniversary, photographs from their wedding and of Lucas as a baby, tickets from concerts they'd attended, and in the center, an envelope. With slightly trembling hands, Rachel took the envelope and opened it. It contained 2 documents. The first, their signed and sealed divorce papers, the second, a handwritten letter. She looked at Michael, a question in her eyes. "Read it," he encouraged gently. Rachel unfolded the letter and began to read. "My dearest Rachel, for 12 years I kept these objects as reminders of what we had lost. Each one represented a moment in our life together that I was afraid to forget. They were anchors to a past I thought was lost forever. When you came back, I discovered that these same objects could have a new meaning. They were no longer just reminders of loss, but testaments to resilience, to second chances, to new beginnings. Over these past 2 years, I have watched in admiration as you have rebuilt your life, how you have woven your past and present into something new and beautiful. You've inspired me to do the same. This greenhouse is my new beginning, a space where I can cultivate new things while honoring what came before. The moon orchid symbolizes our shared history, but also the possibility of new blooms. The divorce papers represent a chapter formally closed, but also the freedom to write new ones. Chapters that, if you're willing, I would like to write with you. Not as husband and wife bound by old vows, but as 2 people who have found each other again, who are choosing each other with full knowledge of who we are now. This isn't a traditional proposal. It's an invitation to explore what we could be together in this new life. No expectations, no pressure, just possibilities. With love, always renewed, Michael. Rachel looked up, tears blurring her vision. Michael was watching her with a mixture of vulnerability and hope. I don't know what to say," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Michael stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "You don't have to say anything right now. he assured her. This isn't a question that needs an immediate answer. It's the start of a conversation. Rachel nodded, grateful for his understanding. When did you know that this is what you wanted? She asked, trying to process her emotions. Michael considered the question carefully. It wasn't one specific moment, he replied. It was gradual. Watching you flourish again, rebuild your life, made me realize that my feelings for you had evolved. I was no longer in love with the Rachel from our memories, but with the woman you've become. Rachel felt her heart quicken at the sincerity in his words. I've been working on this with my therapist, Michael continued, making sure my feelings weren't based on nostalgia or a desire to fix the past. They're real, Rachel. They're about who we are now, not who we were. Rachel took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I felt something changing between us too, she admitted, but I've been afraid to explore it, afraid of risking the stable relationship we've built. Michael nodded in understanding. I get that completely, he said. That's why I don't want to pressure you. I just wanted you to know the possibility is there, if you ever want to explore it. Rachel looked at the moon orchid, its delicate beauty a testament to care and patience. I don't know what that would even look like, she confessed. A relationship between who we are now. Michael smiled softly. Neither do I, he admitted. That's part of the adventure, isn't it? Figuring it out together without the weight of past expectations. Rachel found herself smiling back, a sense of possibility blooming within her. I'd like to try, she said finally, slowly, one step at a time. Michael's face lit up with a joy that made Rachel's heart expand. That's all I could ever ask for, he replied. They looked at each other in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with future possibilities. Then naturally, Michael leaned in and kissed her gently. It wasn't a passionate or urgent kiss, but one that was tender and exploratory, like a first tentative step onto a new path. When they parted, Rachel felt slightly dizzy, but in the best possible way. We should probably head back to the house, Michael suggested after a moment. Lucas and Mia will be here soon, and I have a feeling they have some important news to share too. Rachel smiled, keeping the secret of their engagement. Are we going to tell them about this? She asked, gesturing between them. Michael considered it. How about we wait a little while? He suggested. Give ourselves some space to explore without the pressure of outside expectations, even well-intentioned ones. Rachel appreciated his thoughtfulness. I think that's perfect, she agreed, one step at a time. As they walked back to the house, Rachel paused to admire the garden again. It's truly beautiful, she remarked. I never knew you had a green thumb. Michael smiled sheepishly. Neither did I, he confessed. I started it as a form of therapy on my therapist's suggestion. It turns out there's something deeply satisfying about creating life and beauty with your own hands. Rachel nodded, understanding completely. Like rebuilding a life, she observed. Exactly, Michael agreed. One day, one plant, one decision at a time. They entered the house together, ready to welcome their family and friends. Rachel felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense that her life had come full circle, not back to the beginning, but to a similar place transformed by the journey. Hours later, surrounded by their loved ones, Rachel took in the scene with a profound sense of gratitude. Lucas and Mia were sharing the news of their engagement amidst hugs and congratulations. Ray, now an integral part of their chosen family, was laughing with Michael over a shared story. Eleanor and her husband, who had become good friends, had brought a homemade cake. It was a picture that would have seemed impossible just 3 years ago when she was living on the streets with no memory and no identity. Michael caught her eye from across the room and offered a private smile, a silent promise of future possibilities. Rachel smiled back, feeling something precious and fragile beginning to blossom between them. Something as delicate as the moon orchid, but with the potential to be just as enduring. In 1999, Rachel Reynolds had vanished, fleeing from traumas she couldn't face. 12 years later, she had been found living an entirely different life. And now, 2 years after that reunion, she was finally finding herself, integrating all the pieces of her story into a complete and authentic whole. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it was something more real and more valuable. It was a story of loss and rediscovery, of broken fragments carefully pieced together to create something new and beautiful. A story that would continue to unfold, day by day, relationship by relationship, one step at a time. As the celebration continued around her, Rachel thought of the words she had written in her journal the night before, words that now seemed prophetic. The circle never truly closes because we don't return to the same place we began. Instead, we move forward in a spiral, revisiting familiar territories but from new heights, with a new perspective. Each turn brings us closer to who we are meant to be.